I was feeding the chickens when the crunch of tires on gravel shattered the quiet of the morning. It wasn't the usual sound of my old truck or a neighbor's rusted pickup pulling into the drive. It was heavier, sharper, like something polished and official. I froze, the scoop of feed still in my hand, corn spilling through my fingers and pattering into the dust as the hens clucked nervously. The rooster puffed his chest, strutting like he could scare away whatever was coming, but he seemed uncertain. I turned toward the road, squinting into the sun. A black SUV crept up the driveway, its chrome glinting like a predator's eyes. Behind it, 2 patrol cars followed, their light bars dull in the morning haze but unmistakable all the same. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. This wasn't a friendly visit. This wasn't someone lost. This was deliberate. The SUV door swung open and out stepped Mrs. Greeley, the president of the Homeowners Association, a woman whose perfume you could smell long before she reached you and whose voice could slice through steel. She wore her usual pressed slacks, a pastel cardigan over a blouse, and that smug smile she saved for when she believed she was winning. Her manicured nails clutched a folder thick with papers. "Well, well," she said, as though she'd just caught a stray dog sleeping on her porch. "I knew we'd have to deal with this sooner or later." I stared at her, my hand still tight around the scoop of feed, my knuckles white. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She clicked her tongue and shook her head. "It's not what I'm doing here, it's what you're doing here. You're trespassing on HOA property." The words knocked the air out of me. I almost laughed. Almost. But there was no humor in it, only fury simmering in my chest. "Trespassing?" I echoed, stepping forward until my boots crunched in the gravel. "This is my farm, my land. It was my father's before me. I've got the deeds to prove it." She lifted her chin, smugness radiating from her like heat off asphalt. "Not anymore. The association has jurisdiction. You were sent notices, warnings, letters. You failed to comply. Now it's time to enforce the rules." She waved her papers as though they were divine scripture, her expression one of finality. Behind her, the 2 officers climbed out of their cars. Their uniforms were crisp, their belts heavy with gear. One of them rested a hand near his holster out of habit. The other looked at me with something between pity and resignation, like he hated being here but couldn't change the fact. My stomach dropped. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. Mrs. Greeley's smirk widened. "We don't kid about these things. This neighborhood is meant to be orderly, uniform. No unsightly barns, no smelly animals, no—" She waved her hand in the direction of the henhouse. "Livestock." The words unsightly and smelly burned into me. This wasn't just land. This was my life. My father had built the barn with his bare hands. My mother had raised those chickens before me. Every fence post, every plank of wood, every furrowed row of soil carried the weight of generations. This farm wasn't just dirt, it was blood. "Ma'am," one of the officers said carefully, his voice even but hesitant, "we need you to vacate the premises." The scoop fell from my hand, the corn scattering across the ground. The chickens pecked at it eagerly, oblivious to the storm building around them. My fists curled at my sides. "You've got no right," I snapped. "None of you." Mrs. Greeley's eyes sparkled with triumph. She lived for this, for the control, for bending people to her will. She'd never liked me or my farm. From the first HOA meeting I attended, I could see it in her face. She didn't want me there. She wanted neat lawns and trimmed hedges, rows of beige houses with white shutters, not my weathered farmhouse, and its stubborn refusal to bow to her version of order. I could hear my father's voice in my head, rough with years of work and dust. "This land doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us. Never let anyone take it." I stood taller, though my heart was pounding so hard it rattled my ribs. "You can wave your papers around all you want," I said, my voice rising. "But this farm isn't yours to claim. It never was. And I'll be damned if I let you take it. The younger officer glanced at his partner, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But Mrs. Greeley only stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the sharp tang of her perfume. She lowered her voice, but the venom in it was louder than a scream. You're done here. You hear me? The subdivision's expanding and your little patch of dirt is standing in the way. The sooner you realize that, the easier this will be for everyone. We have developers lined up, investors, people who actually want progress instead of clinging to the past like some, she sneered, country. Bumpkin! The insult stung, but it wasn't new. I'd been called worse. What cut deeper was the way she spoke about progress, as though bulldozing history and paving over memories could ever be called progress. My voice cracked with rage. This land raised me, fed me, taught me what hard work means. And you, I jabbed a finger toward her, shaking with fury. You think you can just roll up here with your SUVs and your little papers and erase all that? She didn't flinch. She wanted me angry. She wanted me to lash out so the cops could haul me off without a second thought. And maybe part of me wanted to give her what she wanted, just to wipe that smug grin off her face. The officers shifted, uncomfortably, like they knew the tension was about to boil over. The older one cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said gently, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're just following orders. Orders? I barked. From who? From her? I pointed at Mrs. Greeley, my hand trembling, with the weight of it all. Since when does a neighborhood busybody get to rewrite property lines and send cops to steal what doesn't belong to her? Neither officer answered. They looked at each other again, a silent exchange I couldn't quite read. Maybe they knew something I didn't. Maybe they hated this as much as I did. But they still stood there, still ready to drag me off my own land if I resisted. My pulse hammered. I thought of my father's calloused hands guiding mine as I planted the first seeds in the field. I thought of my mother humming as she collected eggs from the hens, her apron full and her smile soft. I thought of the long nights I spent fixing fences, mending roofs, tending soil that never asked for anything but respect. And now this woman, this outsider, wanted to take it all away in the name of progress. I could taste the anger, bitter and sharp on my tongue. My voice dropped low, the kind of low that came from somewhere deep inside. If you think I'm walking off this land willingly, you've got another thing coming. The air seemed to thicken, the morning sun suddenly hotter, the gravel crunching louder under shifting boots. Mrs. Greeley's smirk flickered just for a second, but she masked it quickly, snapping her fingers as though she commanded an army. Officers, she said, her voice curt. Do your job. And that was the moment it sank in. The HOA had actually sent the police to evict me. Not just fines, not just letters slipped into my mailbox, not just petty harassment at community meetings. They were here to put me out, to take my family's farm and crush it beneath the wheels of their so-called development. My chest tightened, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of fear. Cold, real fear. Not for myself, but for the land, for the memories, for everything that would be lost if I let them push me aside. I planted my boots in the gravel, my shadow stretching long across the yard, and locked eyes with the officers as they began to step forward. My farm, my fight, my bloodline. I wasn't going anywhere. The officers tightened their belts as they walked toward me, their boots grinding into the gravel like a countdown I couldn't stop. Every step they took sent my pulse into overdrive. The younger one, tall with sandy hair, had his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. The older one's face was a little softer, but his eyes carried the heaviness of someone who'd done this before, someone who'd been ordered to move people against their will and had grown numb to it. One of them cleared his throat. Ma'am, We really don't want this to turn into something ugly. Please, just cooperate. You'll have a chance to appeal this legally. Legally. The word made me laugh, loud, bitter, and sharp enough that the hens scattered toward the coop. Legally? What's legal about this? I jabbed a finger toward Mrs. Greeley, who stood at the edge of the driveway like a queen watching her pawns advance. She has no right, no court order, no authority, just an inflated sense of power and a clipboard. Mrs. Greeley's lips twisted into that smirk again, the one that made me want to rip it clean off her face. I have every right, she said smugly. You're in violation of HOA bylaws. You ignored citations. You refused to comply. We warned you this would happen. Her words stoked the fire inside me until I felt like I might burst. This farm existed before your stupid subdivision, before your bylaws, before your damned HOA meetings with cookies and coffee in styrofoam cups. This is my family's land. You don't get to erase that with a stack of paper. The older officer sighed. Look, we're not here to debate. We're here to enforce. His eyes softened slightly. Don't make this harder than it has to be. My fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Harder for who? For me, watching you trespass on my land? Or for her, waiting for you to clear the way so she can tear down everything my father built? For a moment, there was silence. The only sound was the clucking of chickens and the distant lowing of a cow in the pasture. Then Mrs. Greeley snapped her fingers, sharp as a whip. Enough talk, officers. Remove her. Both deputies hesitated, and I saw it in their eyes. Doubt. They didn't want to do this. But orders were orders, and hesitation was a luxury they couldn't afford. The younger one stepped forward first, hand out like he meant to guide me gently. But the tension in his body betrayed the truth. If I resisted, he'd use force. I took a step back, chest heaving, rage boiling over. My voice dropped to a dangerous growl. You're not taking me off this land. And then I heard it. The unmistakable rumble of a heavy engine, deeper than the SUV, steadier than the patrol cars. Gravel crunched under thick tires. All eyes turned toward the road as a sheriff's truck pulled in, sunlight flashing off the gold star painted on the side. My heart leapt into my throat. The truck rolled to a stop with authority, dust rising around it like a curtain before a play. The door creaked open and a figure stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, his silhouette framed by the blinding morning sun. My chest tightened with relief and dread all at once. It was my brother. His boots hit the gravel with a weight that made the deputies freeze where they stood. He wore the tan sheriff's uniform like it was a second skin, the badge gleaming, his hat casting a shadow over eyes I knew better than anyone. Mrs. Greeley's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat, before she pulled it back like armor. Sheriff, she said smoothly, her tone sugary with false politeness. Perfect timing. We're in the process of enforcing HOA bylaws. This resident is in violation and needs to be removed. My brother didn't even look at her. His gaze went straight to me, searching, steady, protective. His jaw flexed as he took in the scene, the patrol cars in his sister's driveway, the deputies standing like soldiers on the edge of an invisible battlefield, and Mrs. Greeley clutching her papers like they gave her divine authority. He took his time walking forward, the kind of deliberate pace that made everyone else shift nervously, unsure of what was coming. When he finally spoke, his voice carried like thunder across the yard. Who signed off on this nonsense? The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. The deputies glanced at each other again, suddenly less sure of their footing. The younger one stammered, Sir, we were dispatched with orders." "Orders from who?" my brother snapped, his tone sharp enough to cut steel. His eyes darted to Mrs. Greeley. "From her?" Mrs. Greeley bristled, color rising in her cheeks. "Sheriff, with all due respect, the HOA doesn't command my deputies." He cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. "The HOA doesn't have the power to evict landowners from their own property. And the HOA sure as hell doesn't order me. The silence was deafening. Even the chickens seemed to stop clucking. Mrs. Greeley's smile returned, weaker now, but still, clinging to arrogance. You're overstepping, Sheriff. This land falls within the HOA's jurisdiction. She signed an agreement when she— I don't care what she signed, he growled. This is my sister's farm. This is our father's land. And you're trespassing. The words hit me like a jolt. He'd said it out loud, in front of everyone. Our father's land. Not just mine, ours. The deputies shifted again, their uncertainty growing by the second. Mrs. Greeley clutched her papers tighter, her voice rising with desperation. This is official business. We have investors, plans. My brother stepped closer, towering over her now, his eyes burning like wildfire. You have greed, Mrs. Greeley, nothing more. And let me make this perfectly clear. If you or anyone else sets foot on this property again with the intention of removing my family, you'll be the one answering to the law. Her face went pale, the blood draining from it like water down. A sink. For once she had no comeback, no smirk, no triumphant retort. Just silence. The deputies looked at my brother, waiting for direction. He didn't hesitate. Stand down, all of you, now. The younger officer lowered his hand from his holster. The older one nodded slowly, almost with relief, as if he'd been waiting for an out. Mrs. Greeley sputtered, words tripping over each other in a tangled mess. You can't do this! You'll regret this, Sheriff! The HOA— The HOA can shove it, he said flatly. The sound of it nearly made me laugh, though my chest was still tight with adrenaline. For the first time that morning, I felt like I could breathe. Mrs. Greeley's composure finally cracked. Her hands trembled as she stuffed her papers back into the folder, snapping it shut like the clap of a judge's gavel. This isn't over, she hissed, though her voice lacked its usual venom. You'll see. You'll both see. She spun on her heel and stormed back to her SUV, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The engine roared to life, and in a spray of gravel, she peeled out of the driveway. The deputies exchanged glances one last time before quietly retreating to their cars. They didn't say a word as they backed out, their engines muted, their authority suddenly reduced to nothing under my brother's shadow. When the dust settled, the yard was silent again. The chickens, unbothered now, returned to pecking at the scattered feed. The rooster crowed defiantly, as if to declare victory. My brother finally turned to me. His eyes softened, and the tension in his shoulders eased. He put a firm hand on my shoulder, grounding me, steadying me. You okay? He asked quietly. I swallowed hard, emotion catching in my throat. I thought they were going to take it. I thought it was over. He shook his head. Not while I'm here, not while I'm sheriff. The words weren't just comfort, they were a promise. I looked at him, really looked at him, the weight of the moment sinking in. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about a stubborn fight with a power-hungry HOA president. This was about family, about roots, about blood that ran too deep to be dug up and paved over. And as the morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of doubt, I realized something. The battle wasn't just for the farm. It was for everything it represented, and we weren't backing down. The deputies hesitated for a long moment, caught in that space between obedience and common sense. Their orders had brought them here, but their sheriff's voice was the one that anchored them now. I could see the tug of war on their faces, the way their hands twitched by their belts, the way their eyes flicked between Mrs. Greeley's retreating SUV and my brother standing firm in the gravel. Finally, the younger one lowered his head like a scolded child and stepped back. The older one gave a curt nod, as if to say he'd been waiting for this resolution all along. The patrol cars hummed quietly as they reversed out of the driveway, their engines a retreating echo against the silence of the countryside. And then, it was just us. Me, My brother, and the farm that had almost been taken away. The adrenaline hadn't drained yet. It clung to me like sweat, making my hands shake and my chest tighten. I stared at the horizon where the dust of Mrs. Greeley's SUV was still hanging in the air, a fading reminder that she'd been here at all. My brother kept his hand on my shoulder, steady and grounding, like he used to do when we were kids and I was about to pick a fight I couldn't win. "It's over," he said quietly. "At least for now." But I couldn't let myself believe it was truly over. Not with her words still echoing in my ears. "This isn't over. You'll both see." That wasn't the kind of woman who admitted defeat. That was the kind of woman who licked her wounds and came back sharper. "She'll be back," I muttered, my eyes still on the road. "With more papers, more threats, more everything." He didn't deny it. He just squeezed my shoulder. "Harder, then she'll find me waiting." The simplicity of it made something swell inside me. My brother wasn't just the sheriff today. He was family. He was the boy who once ran through these same fields barefoot, who used to sneak apples from the orchard with me, who knew the smell of fresh-cut hay and the sound of the creek running after a rainstorm. He wasn't just defending land. He was defending memory. I bent down, scooping up the spilled corn that still littered the ground, more out of habit than anything else. The chickens came rushing back, pecking greedily, as if nothing had happened. Life on the farm didn't stop for drama. Animals still needed feeding, fences still needed mending, the earth still needed tending. The world moved forward, stubborn in its rhythm, and maybe that was its own kind of defiance. "You shouldn't have to fight them," my brother said, watching me work. His voice was softer now, almost regretful. "They shouldn't even think. They can touch this place." I looked up at him, meeting his eyes. "But they do. They think money makes them untouchable, that bylaws matter more than blood." He took off his hat, running a hand through his hair like he did when he was frustrated. "Well, they're wrong, and I'll make sure they know it." The sun was climbing higher, burning the morning mist off the fields. The light spilled across the rows of crops, across the old red barn with its peeling paint, across the weathered farmhouse that leaned a little more each year but still stood strong. It was beautiful, in the way only something lived in and fought for could be. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Dad always said this land doesn't belong to us. It's part of us. We take care of it, and it takes care of us. My brother nodded, his eyes misting just slightly before he blinked it away. He was right. For a long moment, we just stood there, breathing in the smell of earth and grass and animals, letting the weight of what almost happened sink in. The farm had been one signature away from being lost. If my brother hadn't come when he did, I might have been dragged off and bulldozers would have followed. The thought made me sick. But then I looked at him, my brother, my sheriff, my blood, and I realized something. They could send their letters, their fines, their threats. They could send their cops and their SUVs. But as long as we stood together, they'd never win. "You think she'll try legal action?" I asked finally. He put his hat back on, squinting toward the horizon like he could see her plans forming already. "Maybe, probably. People like her don't stop until someone stops them. But the law is on our side. She knows that. She's just hoping to scare you into giving up." I clenched my fists, anger sparking again. "I'll never give up. Not on this land." His lips curved into the faintest smile. "That's the sister I know." We started walking toward the barn, the gravel crunching under our boots, the air carrying the faint scent of hay. My brother paused by the old wooden fence, running his hand along the weathered boards. I remember when we helped Dad fix this. I couldn't have been more than 12. "You dropped every nail you tried to hammer," I teased, smiling despite everything. He chuckled. "Yeah, but he made me keep at it. Said a fence wasn't just about wood and nails. It was about protecting what mattered." The memory hit. Hard. That was what this whole fight was about. Protection. Not just of land, but of legacy. of family, of the sweat and love poured into every inch of soil. By the time we reached the barn doors, I felt steadier, stronger. Like the farm itself was reminding me that it had survived storms, droughts, winters that bit down to the bone. It could survive. An HOA president. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. Mrs. Greeley wasn't done. She'd come back with something new, some scheme dressed up in legal jargon. But the difference now was that I wasn't standing alone. My brother leaned against the barn, watching me with that protective look he'd worn ever since we were kids. "You don't have to carry this fight by yourself anymore," he said. I nodded slowly. "I know. But I will, if I have to." The rooster crowed again, louder this time, almost like he was adding his own defiance to the moment. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. Even the rooster's on our side. "He always has been," my brother said with a grin. We stood there for a while, just listening to the sounds of the farm, the chickens scratching, the wind rustling the trees, the distant hum of insects. It was peaceful, grounding, real, and it was ours. Finally, my brother pushed off the barn and turned back toward his truck. "I'll put in a report," he said. "Make it official. If she tries this again, there'll be a paper trail showing she's harassing you. That'll buy us time." "Time's all I need," I said firmly. "Time to dig in, to fight back." He gave me one last look, his eyes steady, proud. "You've got more than time, you've got me." And then he climbed into his truck, the engine rumbling to life, steady and sure, like the heartbeat of the land itself. He tipped his hat before pulling away, leaving me standing in the gravel, the morning sun warm on my face. I looked out across the fields, across the fences and the barn and the farmhouse that had weathered decades of storms. This place wasn't just land. It wasn't just a farm. It was family. It was history. It was a promise. And as the sound of his truck faded into the distance, I whispered into the wind, "No one's taking this place from us." The words weren't just a vow. They were a truth, carved into the soil itself, unshakable and eternal. Because the farm was safe, and so was our bloodline's fight to protect it.